Seen nearer, the thing was incredibly strange, for it was no mere insensate machine driving on its way. Machine it was, with a ringing metallic pace, and long, flexible, glittering tentacles swinging and rattling about its strange body. It picked its road as it went striding along, and the brazen hood that surmounted it moved to and fro with the inevitable suggestion of a head looking about. Behind the main body was a huge mass of white metal, like a gigantic fisherman's basket, and puffs of green smoke squirted out from the joints of the limbs as the monster swept by me. Published in 1898, The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells brought us a thrilling and even horrifying scientific romance, an alien invasion of England. It is a story that has been adapted for the cinema, adapted for television, and even adapted as a musical. In this video, we will track the march of the Martians. Mars has long been an object of fascination. Named for the Roman god of war, in the Middle Ages it was known as the Star of Evil. The darker patches on the surface were once thought to be marshes or vegetation, even as late as the 1920s, and there were the supposed canals, which some believed were signs of life upon the surface of the Red Planet. Then came Mr. Wells, who wrote The War of the Worlds and made our flesh creep by bringing to our Earth fearsome but ingenious creatures bent on our destruction, from which we were only saved by the necessary microbe. The War of the Worlds is divided into two parts or books. Book 1, The Coming of the Martians, and Book 2, The Earth Under the Martians. It is a short novel, and in spite of the famous opening line, "No one would have believed in the last years of the 19th century," etc., it is actually set in the early years of the 20th century. And early in the 20th century came the Great Disillusionment. A striking aspect of the story is the remarkable lack of urgency the narrator notes in ordinary people, and the suddenness and transformation of the country over a short duration of time. So some respectable dodo in the Mauritius might have lauded it in his nest and discussed the arrival of the shipful of pitiless sailors in want of animal food. "We will peck them to death tomorrow, my dear." It is also striking in what it does not say. The story is curiously lacking in reference to the monarch and the royal family, or even Buckingham Palace, which you might expect if the author was making an attempt at verisimilitude. Further, the British warship Thunderchild is not once called HMS Thunderchild, and when the narrator reaches Primrose Hill, he sees the dome of the Albert Hall, but not the dome of the Royal Albert Hall. Even if you were an ardent Republican, it seems petty to write out of existence something that existed and exists in the real world simply because you don't like it. Many of the locations mentioned in The War of the Worlds are real places, and tracing them on a map is part of the fun. Their inclusion also adds the thrill of the familiar. So in this video, we will look at the Martians fighting machines and trace the routes they take as witnessed by both the narrator and his brother. And if you like this video, then why not press the like button, share word of it on social media, and subscribe to this channel. If you don't like this video, press the dislike button, share word of it on social media, and subscribe to the channel anyway. The battlefield of the War of the Worlds is surprisingly small, taking in West Surrey, Middlesex, and East Essex. This is not some distant foreign field, but the home counties, the safe and familiar. We start in Surrey, and invasions, heat rays and general mayhem do not tend to happen in Surrey, or at least not usually. Incidentally, Surrey is Old English for Southerly District, southerly in relation to Middlesex or Middle Saxons, while Essex is East Saxons. The first landing is 2 miles from the unnamed narrator's Maybury Hill house, which is apparently where H.G. Wells lived whilst writing the book. The location is the common between Horsell, Ottershaw and Woking, near the sandpits, and the cylinder leaves heather burning, blue smoke rising, and sand and gravel thrown in all directions. This, Horsell Common, is their beachhead, and from this beachhead comes the Martian fighting machines. A monstrous tripod, higher than many houses, striding over the young pine trees and smashing them aside in its career. A walking engine of glittering metal, striding now across the heather, articulate ropes of steel hanging from it, and the clattering tumult of its passage mingling with the riot of the thunder. A flash, and it came out vividly, heeling over one way with 2 feet in the air, to vanish and reappear almost instantly as it seemed, with the next flash 100 yards nearer. Can you imagine a milking stool tilted and bowled violently along the ground? That was the impression those instant flashes gave. But instead of a milking stool, imagine it a great body of machinery on a tripod stand. About 100 feet tall, with a body like aluminium, each is piloted by a single Martian. It is armed with a heat ray and a device similar to a gun tube which projects a black smoke as lethal as a poison gas. The fighting machines can also discharge steam from nozzles in order to clean away the smoke, which brings up the question of water, heat and boiler. The steam reacts with the smoke, turning it into a powder. Each cylinder carries 3 such fighting machines, and so by the Wednesday after the initial landings, the Martians are 18 fighting machines strong, minus 3 lost in battle. My version of the fighting machine here echoes that of the better-known illustrations of Henrik Alvan Courier, but differs in some respects, such as having a single LUT or eye, which is a nod to the Steven Spielberg film. Ten shots are fired from Mars, each cylinder supposedly landing every 24 hours. But the narrator mentions the arrival of only 7 cylinders, and he puts the 7th landing early on Wednesday when it should come down on Thursday. The first cylinder, of course, lands on Horsell Common, Thursday night or Friday early morning, the second in the Byfleet or Addlestone golf links. In my copy of the story, Wells uses both names, just after midnight Saturday morning, and the third at Purford, just after midnight, morning of Sunday. As we can see, this initial trio is concentrated in one particular location in Surrey, which raises the question of, why do the Martians choose Surrey? The next 4 come down in London, or close enough to be in London. Assuming Wells means the park near Hampton Court, the 4th falls on Bushy Park, after midnight, Monday. The 5th falls on Sheen, Tuesday, which really spoils the narrator's day, and the 6th at Wimbledon, apparently also on a Tuesday, but perhaps I'm reading the text wrongly. The 7th falls on Primrose Hill, Wednesday after midnight. Today, some of these areas are built up, and what were once villages outside London have now been devoured by the capital. One day in the future, they will be villages again, and then probably tundra before the feet of advancing glaciers. Their march on London suggests the Martians understand its significance as a national capital, and as the foremost city of the powerful British Empire. They don't target Birmingham, Manchester, Edinburgh, or Paris, New York and Berlin. We follow the Martians' march through the eyes of the nameless narrator and the equally nameless younger brother of the narrator. The former is near Woking when it all kicks off, whilst the latter is in London. By Saturday evening, the Martians' heat ray has turned on Woking and damaged the Oriental College and a mosque. This is the Shah Jahan Mosque, the first purpose-built mosque in Britain, which is still standing to this day. Once it has become obvious the invaders are not going to share this green and pleasant land with its indigenous inhabitants or with the English, the narrator takes his wife to safety in Leatherhead via Old Woking and Send. He then returns to Maybury Hill just after midnight via Ockham and Purford, just in time to see a fighting machine for the first time and the arrival of the third cylinder. It is now Sunday. The first Martian advance reaches Weybridge and Shepperton, where the first proper victory against them takes place, the destruction of a fighting machine. The Martians then retreat back to Horsell Common. The narrator uses a boat on the River Thames to reach Upper Harleyford, by which time the Martians have begun their second advance. 3 Martian fighting machines in line abreast, 1.5 miles between each, advance through Byfleet and Purford towards Ripley and Weybridge and destroy a human artillery battery at Paynes Hill Park. Another battery on St George's Hill knocked 1 fighting machine over, but the battery is destroyed and the fighting machine is subsequently repaired. 7 fighting machines with black tubes now advance in line abreast. The British have positioned artillery batteries at Staines, Hounslow, Ditton, Esher and Ockham. Having crossed the River Thames, the Martians form a crescent 12 miles across and stop just out of artillery range. They fire their black smoke, killing the gunners. Further batteries on Richmond Hill and Kingston Hill, which are using searchlights, are also silenced. The Martians again form line abreast, from Hanwell to Combe and Malden, and advance. Only 4 days after the first cylinder fell, organised resistance by the British collapses, and so begins the panicked exodus from London. It was the beginning of the rout of civilization, of the massacre of mankind. The narrator's brother is in London, and initially he witnesses the Martian invasion only from a distance, gathering information at Waterloo railway station. At first, there is only rumours and vague news. London is calm, but growing increasingly uneasy. The brother sees a curious brown scum drifting down the Thames from the direction of Weybridge, Chertsey and Shepperton. On Monday, the morning of the panicked flight, a dispatch from the British Commander-in-Chief is published in a newspaper, reporting that Richmond, Kingston and Wimbledon have been destroyed, and that there is no safety but in instant flight. The brother, along with most of London, decides to make a sharp exit. After an aborted attempt to get on a train at Chalk Farm railway station, he loots a bicycle shop and takes to Belsize Road. He skirts Edgware Road and arrives at Edgware itself. You can see here the road is straight, as it is laid upon a part of the old Roman road called Watling Street. It is worth noting that the brother does not see any fighting machines until very late, so his peregrinations are useful in showing us where the Martian sweep has yet to reach. Perhaps thinking to reach Chelmsford, the brother takes a lane eastwards and follows a footpath northeast. He rescues 2 women, Mrs. and Miss Elphinstone, who join him. South of Barnet, they see a great wave of people, refugees in their own country, heading north, full of fear of the Martians who they believe are right behind them. Indeed, by early Monday afternoon, the Martians are at Westminster. This stream of humanity carries them through Chipping Barnet, but a mile north of the town they break out and head eastward towards Hadley, to a hill near East Barnet where they rest. On Tuesday, near Colchester, they hear rumours that the Martians have, by now, been seen at Highgate and Nesden, and are believed to have all of London. Given that the first fighting machine did not appear until after midnight of Sunday, this is blitzkrieg indeed, Martian style. The 7th cylinder supposedly falls on Primrose Hill during the early morning of Wednesday. That very day, the brother and his female companions reach Chelmsford, where they lose their horse and hear rumours of Martians at Epping and the detonation of the Waltham Abbey powder mills, blown up in a vain attempt to destroy the invaders. They reach Tillingham by midday, remarkably quickly for 3 people on foot, and beyond it lies the coast. From the deck of an escaping steamer, the brother sees Martian fighting machines for the first time. One appears advancing along the muddy coast from the direction of Foulness. Another is just beyond the Crouch, and is joined by a third. It has been only 6 days since the first alien landing, and they have already reached the Essex coast. A warship described as an ironclad ram and also a torpedo ram, Thunderchild, not to be confused with the Akira-class starship, destroys a fighting machine and then seems to take out a second, but is, alas, self-destroyed. It is worth noting that by this time, the ram had become seriously obsolete, and only one HMS Polyphemus was ever built by the British. Be that as it may, by the end of Book 1, 3 fighting machines have been destroyed, but the Martians have reinforcements on the way, and they are, in effect, masters of the heart of the British Empire. Over the blue hills that rise southward of the river, the glittering Martians went to and fro, calmly and methodically, spreading their poison cloud over this patch of country and then over that, laying it again with their steam jets when it had served its purpose, and taking possession of the conquered country. They do not seem to have aimed at extermination so much as at complete demoralization and the destruction of any opposition. Book 2 of the War of the Worlds is somewhat grandiosely called The Earth Under the Martians. Grandiose as they dominate not the whole Earth but only a small but important part of England. We remain exclusively with the nameless narrator from now on. It is Monday and the narrator escapes Halliford, passing through Sunbury, Hampton Court and Bushy Park, where there is no sign of the 4th cylinder which had supposedly landed there during the night. He reaches Twickenham, which is uninjured by black smoke and heat ray. Richmond is on fire, but the bridge is crossable. Taking the road towards Barnes, the narrator spots Martians near Kew, a fighting machine picking up people and putting them into its basket, and he hurries on. Sheen is silent, having escaped destruction, and here the narrator searches for food. At a house where the road turns towards Mortlake, he stops. This turns out to be unfortunate, as the 5th cylinder lands almost on top of him and his companion. We know little of the Martians' movements during the 15 or so days the narrator spends trapped. Leatherhead is destroyed by a single fighting machine 2 days into this unwilling sojourn, and 3 days later the narrator hears distant artillery fire, 6 reports, a pause, and 6 more, then silence. So some form of resistance remains, even this late into the invasion. Once the Martians have moved on, the narrator emerges into a desolate London, parts of which are thick with red weed. He goes toward Kew, but on seeing the bridges thick with the weed, he turns and heads towards Mortlake, towards Roehampton, and comes out on Putney Common. He struggles along the road towards Putney itself, and stops for food at the Putney Hill Inn. He does not see any fighting machines. He takes the road from the top of Putney Hill to Wimbledon, and on the edge of Wimbledon Common, no Wombles alas, he hears news of a Martian camp, Hampstead Way, and of a couple of fighting machines spotted at Hammersmith, as well as news of a Martian flying machine. The narrator crosses Fulham Bridge and moves towards Walham Green and Brompton, along Fulham Road. There are drunk people about, which is surprising, as well as dead bodies, which is not. There is destruction at Ealing and Kilburn, but we are at South Kensington now, and the narrator wanders up Exhibition Road to Hyde Park. He crosses the Serpentine and reaches Oxford Street via Marble Arch, and he does that most British of things. He stops at a pub. Then he continues on through residential squares to Baker Street and on to Regent's Park, and we have been here before. his brother lives in apartments near Regent's Park, and the narrator's feet will carry him close to Chalk Farm railway station. It is in Regent's Park that he sees a stationary fighting machine, wailing but still. Something has happened, but the full implications do not strike the narrator immediately. He sees a wrecked handling machine near St. John's Wood Station, but pushes on towards Primrose Hill, noting a second Martian fighting machine near the Zoological Gardens. After a brief time in a campman's shelter, he approaches Primrose Hill, via St. Edmund's Terrace, where a third fighting machine is standing motionless. The War of the Worlds is not a story in which mankind wins against invading Martians. It is a story in which invading Martians lose. The Martians die as a result of bacteria, not human action. It is a close call, a warning concerning mankind's vulnerability and hubris. The British take too long to recognise the threat and act. This is not to be wondered at, of course, as these are men from Mars, and the news of such invaders might strike one as absurd. But they underestimate their Martian opponents from the first, and as a result they have their collective bottoms very thoroughly kicked. Another point worth noting lies with the numbers. It is rapidly becoming a widely acknowledged truism that a small organised minority can overturn the will of a large disorganised majority. The invaders in the War of the Worlds are not numerous, but they are organised and they have come prepared. They have a plan, and they have the will to carry it out. It might be worth imagining just how far the Martians would have gone in the real world. With their flying machine, they would be able to take their heat rate against warships at sea, for without mastery of the air, they could never master the sea. At the time of which the War of the Worlds is set, the Royal Navy was the largest and most powerful navy in the world, and if a small torpedo ram such as the Thunder Child could take out 2 fighting machines, then a battle squadron might wipe out several, if the Martians were unwise enough to stand on the coast in full view of their guns. Something else worth noting is that mobile artillery was available to the British Army. So in a real battle, the Martians might have found incinerating artillery batteries rather more difficult, especially if they were up against mortars fired from behind hills. Pitting the Martians against a real-world military of that era might make an interesting video. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video, or at least didn't hate it.